Have you ever heard of the Great Fear? No, not that one. This Great Fear was a massive panic that spread across France in the summer of 1789. A phantom uprising that in some ways was more terrifying than the real thing. You see, the French Revolution had begun with the storming of the Bastille, and the people of Paris were still in a revolutionary mood. But in the countryside, the situation was different. The peasants there were not so much interested in storming a palace as they were in storming a manor house and taking their revenge on the aristocrats who lived there. Rumors began to spread that a peasant revolt was imminent, that the peasants were going to rise up and kill every aristocrat in sight. And this rumor spread like wildfire. People began to flee the countryside for the cities, for Paris in particular, where they believed they would be safe. But as more and more people headed to Paris, the situation there became increasingly dire. Food shortages and skyrocketing prices were already bad enough, but now there were also rumors that the city itself might be attacked, that the peasants might storm Paris just as they had stormed the Bastille. So people began to flee Paris, but it was too late. The panic had spread to the rest of France, and the roads were clogged with people trying to get out. And so the Great Fear took on a life of its own. People were fleeing in terror from the countryside into the cities, and then from the cities into the countryside, and no one was safe. Even the aristocrats were not safe in the countryside. They were forced to flee to Paris, which was supposed to be the safest place of all, only to find that it was under the control of revolutionaries who hated their guts. And so it was that the Great Fear, this mass panic, this phantom uprising, ended up being more destructive than any actual peasant revolt could have been. It led to the near total destruction of the French aristocracy and the French economy, and paved the way for the Reign of Terror. So why don't we remember it? Well, partly because it was a fake revolution, a panic that never really had any real victims. The aristocrats who lost their heads during the French Revolution, they lost them during the real uprising in the cities. But also, until recently, historians didn't know very much about the Great Fear. There wasn't even a name for it. Historians couldn't even agree on what had happened in the summer of 1789. But in the 1980s, a French historian named François Furet came along and put all of this together, piecing together the story of the Great Fear from local accounts, from Garrick's Acton, the records of the courts, and he published his findings in a book called The French Revolution, a history in documents, which I highly recommend if you're interested in this topic. What do you think? Would you have rather lived through the real revolution or the Great Fear? Let me know in the comments.